I'll do the exterior, looking around for tracks on in the food sources. Don't get me wrong, that's a good place if you have them on public. Like, yeah, like I can find big buck tracks on the food source. Odds are on public he's not there during the daylight, maybe, but I doubt it. He's in some nook and cranny somewhere that ain't nobody getting to, and then I'm gonna go find that nook and cranny and hunt that.
Dude, what a tank.
Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. My name's Nick. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to grow this channel. What I'm trying to do here on the channel is answer a lot of the questions that I can't answer on my social media pages. Maybe just some little bit longer explanations. Guys are wanting to know tactics, certain kinds of, stand locations, how I'm hunting certain times of the year. I get a ton of questions on my gear. So this is kind of the YouTube channel where I'm going to dump a lot of that information. This isn't your professional hunter telling you how to hunt. This is how I hunt, how I've kind of learned over the past 7 or 8 years on public and growing up hunting some private ground. I do hunt private ground, but a lot of what I'm doing is we're talking public ground, and I'm very aggressive, stand on my back, get in and after it. So if you're new to the channel, you like that kind of stuff, make sure you're subscribed. Recently, I posted a poll whether you guys wanted to talk about trail cameras or you guys wanted to talk about late season, and everybody's wanting to talk about late season, and I get it. There's a lot of guys out there that got tags a punch. Me too. I got another buck tag here in Illinois, and so it is burning a hole in my pocket, and I'm going to be after it this late season trying to get on one, and hopefully we can get it done. My tactic has always been late season is odds are if I'm hunting public, then I've ended up on 2 or 3 different pieces that I know big bucks exist. That's a big thing for me. I don't like hunting areas. It doesn't make me feel comfortable hunting areas that I don't know something is in there. I want to scout it before I'll kick the buck out of there and ruin the opportunity to hunt that deer, just to know that he's there, before I'll just go, oh, this spot looks good, and go and hunt it. So hopefully by the end of the season, I've had encounters with bucks, trail cameras. I've scouted it, multiple times this season. I do that a lot. Huge tip. Scout your spots all year round, and then you'll start to pick up on what's new. I go into this spot that I scouted 2 weeks ago that I haven't hunted all year, but I go in and scout it, do a little walk around, and all of a sudden I'm finding big buck tracks in the creek that weren't there on November. You just start picking up on stuff like that. It's the same way these deer are that good. They're just there every day. So odds are I have a couple different pieces that I know big bucks are at. Then what I'm doing is I know it's bed to food, food to bed. I don't have, on the public ground that I hunt, we just don't have the food plots that hold them. This time of year, we do have the destination fields, but they're normally on private ground. So they're usually moving and bedding on the public and heading towards private. And super pressured situations, a lot of times they'll even just be as close to the private as they can, and they'll just pile into it, depending on how much, excuse me, depending on how much pressure they're getting in those areas. Sorry, I'm sick. But what I'm looking for is security cover, security cover, security cover. And then once I found that security cover, I'm not hunting it until I find big buck tracks. Big buck sign is always good to have in areas. But like I said, odds are I'm hunting these spots because I know there's a big one in the area. Whether that's from trail camera pictures or whether it's from, like I said, scouting and hunting all season, I know there's bucks in there that are big enough that I want to target. In a lot of cases in my neck of the woods, that's usually a 3.5-year-old or bigger. Looking at 130s to 140s as being my line of, I probably won't shoot much underneath that, just for this area though. So that 140s range is really what I'm looking for, is a really good deer. And then there's definitely opportunities for bigger deer. So if I'm getting on one, then I'm definitely going to stick with him. I've been burnt by a couple of real big ones before. But we'll talk about how to not make those mistakes in a second. What I'm targeting though is if you got a big buck rub in there, it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm going and checking the creek crossings. I'm waiting for these warm fronts. Right now it's December 16th. It's like 55 degrees today. Well, it's been like 20 degrees throughout like your daytime temperature, and now all of a sudden it's been 40 to 55 degrees for the past 3 days. So it's just muddy mess out there. Well, that's when I'm going into these thickets and I'm finding these out routes. And all it is like it's pretty much just backtracking. I'm going to find wherever their food source that I think is, or if I know this area and I have maybe some history with the thickets that I think that they normally use this time of year, or I'm targeting those thickets. A buck is going to go and find himself some weird pinch corner, something in there that he's going to be able to bed in multiple different wind directions. And then he's just kind of, let's just say if this thicket's a couple acres, he's being able to bounce around it with different winds to keep himself safe. These bucks are not leaving these bedding areas without the wind really in their favor, whether it's an off wind or not, or unless they've 100% been watching an oak flat and then they get up and move into the oak flat because they've been watching it for 4 hours. So odds are when you set up for these type of ambushes, you're, at least for me, like I'm normally giving them the wind. I'm just trying to find a way to hunt without where I think he's bedding or where he's coming out of, wherever they can't smell there. They come out a different way. They bust me. That's just part of hunting. For the most part, what I'm trying to do is just give them as much of the wind as I can and get off of it. Just get off to the side somewhere. And I'm trying to target that thicket where he's going to get up and come out of. Now everyone's like, they bed right on the edge of it. To my acknowledgement, I've never really ran into that very often except for in the rut. It seems like the bigger bucks kind of bury themselves in it. And I think they're far enough in it that they can see out of it, but they feel so safe. It's all like Russian olive or honeysuckle or hedge. So it's real, or cedar thickets. It's real condensed in there anyway. So a predator like me would be really loud trying to get through in there. So I think they feel really comfortable kind of pushing up in it 30, 60 yards and finding some nook or deadfall or some sort of back wall that they can go and bed up against and smell behind them and have a couple different ways to just bolt out of there. So what I'm trying to do is like just for scouting purposes, I'm going to the creek crossings. If you hunt next to a lake or a river, I'm going to go watch or walk the edge of the lake or the river, down by down by the bank, trying to get big buck prints. And then I'm gonna look for, this is the thicket that I think he's in. Here's the destination food source a half a mile away or whatever. Where is the trail that they're using to get out of this big thicket? And then I'm looking in there for big buck tracks. That is the number one thing that I'm looking for. I don't care what the food source is. I don't care what they're eating. Like, I don't care about any of that. Like, I care about, do I know that there's a big buck in this area? And the only way that you're knowing that he's using it is if there's big buck tracks coming in and out of this thicket. And all you have to do is find that one cow path where all the deer coming and going from, and then find the buck tracks there. Odds are you're not going to kill him right there, but at least then okay, he is using this bedding area. And then now I can kind of circle it or do whatever I have to do to find the, without wind bumping the shit out of it. I'm going to kind of circle it and find where I think he's coming in and out of. And that's where I'm making my setup. If it's far enough away from a food source and we get a good cold front, bad weather throughout the night, the moon phase is right where you're not having any kind of moon, and I can sneak back in this bedding area and know that he might come in just a little bit later, even if it's just 30 minutes later than he normally would in the dark, at least I can try to beat him. The moon's definitely a big part of that. I'm not going to only do it on no moon phases, but I'll be less likely to go jump back in a bedding area more in the morning, right next to where his bed's at, and try to figure it out. A lot of times if I have crappy moon or wind or whatever, I'm probably trying to just be in that area where I can see that thicket, be 100 yards, 80 yards on the other side. This time of year, everything's wide open, so I can get across and not really be a booger to those deer. And if I do get busted, I'm getting busted way over there and they're comfortable with that. and I'm pulling up the glass and I'm just trying to watch and see whether I can see him go in there in bed, where he went in from, what the wind was doing, like those kind of things. If I do have a better moon or something, some sort of cold snap or whatever that I think will hold them in the field maybe just a little bit longer, then I will go back onto these bedding areas. The problem is I don't like bumping deer in those thickets like that early in the morning, late season, because once you change that pattern of him coming in, you're changing the bed. You're changing where he's going to come in and out of, because now he's been compromised or he knows he's being hunted, so he's going to be extra careful. And you're already dealing with an extra careful deer because he's just went through 3 months of being shot at and hunted. So he's not dumb. You're dealing with an educated deer at that point. And that's what makes it really, really hard. So again, I'm not really paying attention to what they're eating and what they're hammering corn or what bean field they're in. It's like if I see one leaving an area and I see him in the bean field, like I'm not thinking target bean fields. Like I'm going back there and finding the thicket and seeing where he's at in that thicket and trying to get as close to him and play that game as possible. Now I'm not necessarily setting up right over his bed or anything like that. A lot of times I'm 60 to 80 yards away from where I actually think he's bedding. I just know that he'll use this oak flat or this ditch or this whatever to either J hook in there or J hook out. And guys don't talk about that, but big bucks 100% don't just get up and go to the cornfield to the right. I see them, especially if they're not right on that cornfield, and let's just say that they're bedding here and 40, 50 yards south of them is the food source and the wind's blowing out of it. Like they'll go down and they're going to J hook and scent check that whole entire field and then go up in it. They'll do that at 200, 300, 150 yards, maybe a ditch over there away. And so that's where you're not getting him on that food source for an hour and a half after dark. It's because he came out of that thicket, he worked the edge, fed on all that browse, fed on whatever oaks maybe he could feed on his way out there, did a big long J hook to smell this entire field before he went up in it. I'm kind of looking for that in between right there. Where do they come out of the thicket? Like, where do they come out of the thicket and they're heading to use a trail to go to their destination food source? Some things to keep in mind. When you're setting up, hide yourself the best that you can and don't skyline yourself. That is a big thing. This time of year, deer are very savvy to what you are. I've learned this time of year, I'll start like filming with my phone a little bit more instead of trying to bring in a bunch of camera gear. That way I just have the camera that I can kind of move around. I don't have all this gear everywhere trying to click buttons and do stuff. You're going to get busted faster. These bucks are on edge when they're walking through, and they're not after a doe with their nose on the ground being dumb and can get busted. Like the buck that I shot caught me hitting the GoPro, but it's during the rut and he's kind of like, he just got rut brain and stared at me for, more than 30 seconds and got shot. If he would have been slow and paying attention, he probably would have had me busted at 40, 50 yards instead of 8. Late season, they're not going to do that. They're moving through slow. A lot of the big bucks that I see this time of year are taking 5-10 steps and stopping and sitting there for 20 minutes. Taking a 30-yard move and then sitting there for 10 minutes. And then making a 45-yard move and sitting there for 20 minutes. Like, that's how these big bucks are going to move. And it's not even a 20-yard dash sometimes. Sometimes they take 2 steps and stop and sit for 10 minutes and 2 steps and sit for 30 minutes and 2 steps. And now you're sitting there with a standoff with a big buck and it's dark and he's 75 yards away, but he's going to use this trail and walks by you in dark. I've had that happen a couple different times. Anyways, so I'm not getting as high this time of year. A lot of the times I'm trying to find thick, gnarly branches that I can hide in. I'm only getting 2 or 3 shots in these thickets anyways. So it's a lot of just sit there with your bow kind of as ready as you can, turn on the camera, draw and shoot. You're not watching them make real big moves in that thicket, or you can watch them, but you're not getting a shot off until they're in there. And I've had it where, you think they're going to come into this trail and they don't, and they bust you or whatever. But if you try to get up there in that skyline and you're not high enough or whatever the case is, I feel like it just makes you that much more vulnerable. Plus, the wind travels so much more, like so much further with the higher that you get. So you're making your cone of scent smaller by being closer to the ground, especially in those evening scents when those thermals are really going to take over and it gets cold at night and just sucks everything down. I really try to be like on the edge of ditches and stuff like that where I can really try to push my wind to where I want it. The hard part is they're on alert and you're not very high, so you can't get away with a lot of movement. So that's like my number one tip. If I can give a tip in this, is be very mindful of your setups. Put yourself in positions that you're very, 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 very hidden and don't make a lot of movement. And I'm talking, I hunt these thickets, and what's killed me before is I have a bad back. And so I get very fidgety in the tree stand, and it's just, I can't stand up very long. I need to sit, and then I need to stand back up, and then I need to lean on this leg, and then I need to leg. I'm terrible at it. And so late season's really hard for me sometimes because these deer will bust me and I don't even know they're there yet because they haven't broken the thicket and they're so close to that thicket and I'm in the thicket with them and they just pop their head out and I never seen their head move out. And I go and do one of these to move to the other tree and boom, I'm getting snorted at and they take off. So it's a lot of really trying to pay attention, be set up where they're not going to look, be in a dark spot. And then I'm ultimately giving them their wind. That's my other tip. This time of year, it's not that I'm not playing the wind. It's just that like I don't care so much that it is a wind that doesn't work for me. That's how you're going to kill those deer. And so you need to get in there on winds that work really good for him. And you need to figure out how in the world you can do that. Sometimes it's really hard to do. I have even went in and busted a deer out midday, knowing that he would come back, just because I didn't know when else to do it, but I had to make a trail to get into this tree to be able to shoot what I needed to shoot. And I kicked this deer up. The next day he came in and busted me, swooped a little bit further this time to get into the bed, which makes sense. And he had me busted, but I was trying to get in there on a wind that works perfectly for him and that he would be very dumbfounded once I was in there. And all I'm trying to do is just give like some sort of off wind, and then I'm just trying to position myself to get in there, which late season is really freaking hard to do because they can see a really long ways. So these big loops that I'm used to being able to do through the open timber and stuff like that to get around on them, it doesn't work anymore because they can see 2 ridges over, you do that. And so they're not going to get up and move. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is give them, if they have to give you an example, if a deer is bedding and the thicket is to the north and the destination food is to the south, I'm trying to get in between his bedding area and his food source with the wind blowing from the south to him. So that's where I'm targeting the very edge of that thicket, and I'm blowing my wind into the bedding area, but let's just say I'm guessing he's bedding on this side of it. So if I'm getting in this trail, then I'm getting on this side of that trail far enough that he's got to make a 10 to 20 yard adjustment on the trail that he picks to be able to bust me. And it happens. I get busted by does this way, and then he never shows up because a random doe decided to not take the main trail coming out of this thicket. So it does happen. Kind of think of that tactic more throughout the entire season, but I think late season is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important because these deer especially the big bucks, are just not doing it. They make dumb mistakes in the rut and will not follow their nose completely because they're following a doe. And the only thing he can smell is her, and he doesn't care about anything else that goes through his nostril except for her. So when she's ass backwards in the wind, bedding in a random ridge, he's with her. He don't care. In the late season, after being hunted and all the pressure and being busted and getting shot at and all this kind of stuff, and now you're condensing where he can't go and hide in his maybe normal places because the foliage just isn't there anymore. So he's ultra paranoid. And so he's not making moves without the wind being in his face or quartering or sighting. Whatever he's trying to smell, he's smelling. That is just how a big buck is going to operate every time, which is really hard to do. I think it's the most challenging part about hunting big bucks late season to me is figuring out how can I give him the wind. And a lot of times it comes down to like, how can I get in there with that wind? Like, yeah, I can, once I get set up with the south wind, like it's great. But to come in there with the south wind, he can see me walk across this ridge. He can see me come in from this parking lot. I can't get close enough through there. Like that's what it really comes dialed down to. I mean, I've heard of guys, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Heath Cisco that he's a late season guy, like Mr. Frost. And he put over like a white sheet blanket to walk across a field in the snow just to get to a deer so they couldn't see him. Like they can see you cross those things and they won't move the same as they did when they watched you walk across it. So how you access your tree stand is really important also. Probably most important once you get everything else dialed. Once you know how to get in there and where you're going to set up and the wind that you're going to set up, you found your big buck tracks coming out of this thicket, whatever, you got to get in front of it. How are you going to get there without him being able to see you? Use ditches. Like I'll even get in the thicket with them and I'll crawl if I have to, get right on the edge of that thicket with them and just move real slow until you get to where you need to be. It's probably the most challenging, I think. Once you can kind of figure everything else out, getting in there without getting busted is really difficult this time of year because the woods is just so open. Like I said, a lot of the times I'm entering that thicket from a different way and using the thicket to get in there. That's why I like windier, colder days. Snow, sloppy, wet messes that I can get in and be quiet and break branches and it not carry as far or it not be as loud because it's soft. Anyways, I'm sure I missed some things that I do. I didn't want to come on here and just read off of a piece of paper of all the normal late season stuff that you hear. I kind of wanted to give you like my real experience and how I'm hunting it right now. I'm not paying attention to much other big buck sign outside of the tracks. I'm not really using cell cameras this time of year really to do too much. The areas that I'm hunting, I could definitely get pictures of them, but they were set up for getting a more full season look. So my trail cameras aren't helping me a whole bunch this time of year. I have been running cell cams this year. I ran 2, so I'm kind of learning them a little bit. This is my first year of like really kind of taking them serious. I would like to throw that in there as a tactic this year, being able to throw a cell cam. But if I was going to do it, my cell cam would be going high at 10 foot in a tree, trying to get pictures of, like I said, that big, that horse trail that comes out of, that cattle path that comes out of the thicket. I'm probably just putting it on there. Odds are you're not going to get him there in daylight, but at least I know what I'm looking for once I get pictures of him. And he'll be there at some point in the next 7 days. And if not, probably sooner. And so then I'm not really using it to pattern him, really. More or less just to know that he's in the area and there's a buck in there that I'm willing to kill. And then I'm not really using it unless the camera is like, hey man, he's daylight here every day. Then of course, like, yeah, I'm going to try to slip in there and shoot him. But odds are I don't think you're really going to get your pictures like that unless you're in his bedding area. Like, and you're going to freak him out by trying to throw a cell cam or any kind of camera in there, I think. Maybe not, but that's my opinion. 8 to 10 foot in a tree, looking down over that, you could call it a staging area if you want, but just that one trail that's coming out of the bedding area or into the bedding area that you have big buck tracks on, and see what he is. Like that would be how I would use the trail camera this time of year. I think I covered pretty much everything. I'm sure, like I said earlier, I'm sure I missed something. Yeah, I'm not really, there's not much different than any other time of the year. I try to keep the KISS method, and that's keep it simple, stupid. The best of my ability is I really like the hang and bang style, and I look at it more as where can I kill him and when can I kill him and how can I kill him than I do what you're supposed to do late season is find that good food plot or that good bean field or cornfield that's not cut and hunt that. And I'm not saying that those are bad places. It's just not usually where I'm starting. I'm starting where I know I've seen big bucks this season and then I'm going in and I'll do the exterior, looking around for tracks in the food sources. Don't get me wrong, that's a good place if you have them on public. Like, yeah, like I can find big buck tracks on the food source. Odds are on public he's not there during the daylight, maybe, but I doubt it. He's in some nook and cranny somewhere that ain't nobody getting to, and then I'm going to go find that nook and cranny and hunt that. Anyways, I hope this really helps. If you guys have questions, comments, whatever, hit that comment section, like the video, share the video. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know what tactics you guys are throwing out. Let me know what video you guys want to see next. And like I always say, hunt hard, scout harder.